We've had a few of those.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the members and guests to the Wednesday, March 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and Placer County Local Transportation Authority. We welcome the public to in-public participation. In addition, remote teleconferencing and participation is available to board members and public pursuant to the provisions of Government Code Section 54953E due to the COVID-19 State of Emergency Proclamation and recommendations for social distancing. There will be public comment opportunities throughout this meeting for the public to comment. After I open public comment, those joining by webinar can use, After I open public comment, those joining us by webinar can signal they wish to speak by the raise hand button on the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you're joining over the phone, you can press *9. PCTPA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. For those joining in person, you're welcome to come to the podium. We ask that anyone making public comments state their name, city, and city of residence. You will then make a maximum of 3 minutes, or have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and we will notify you when your 3 minutes is up. If you're experiencing technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during the meeting, please email your comment to Solvi Sable, our clerk, at ssabol@pctpa.net. This board meeting, because of the meeting is being conducted via teleconference, all votes will be roll call votes. Board members will be asked that they state their name prior to making a motion or seconding a motion for the record. Once the item has been moved and seconded, I will request the clerk to call a roll call vote. Let's see. Jim, will you lead us in the pledge? Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Baker.
Here.
Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes. Howdeshelt.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Wilkins. Here. Got a quorum.
Thank you. AB 361. Solvi?
As you're aware, with AB 361, the board can continue to meet with the relaxed teleconference rules due to the state of emergency and state recommendations for social distancing. The board needs to periodically consider the state and the circumstances of the state of emergency and their ability to continue to meet safely in person under the state's social distancing recommendations. These social distancing guidelines have been evaluated and continue to warrant meeting remotely, and we ask that the board adopts findings to allow for the continued teleconference meetings.
Thank you, Solvi. Conversational board?
Nope.
Everybody okay with that? All right. We have a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second.
Broadway is faster.
Okay. Baker.
Aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Approval of action minutes from February 23rd.
I don't have any items.
Okay.
I'd move.
This is just move approval of action minutes.
Yep.
Yeah, move approval of the action minutes of February 23rd, 2022.
Second motion.
Roll call.
Baker.
Aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes? Haudashelt?
Aye.
Joyner?
Yes.
Jones? Wilkins?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Are we all in a hurry or something?
Yes, sure.
Yes,
Yes. Hi, yes.
exactly. Agenda review. Anybody have any items they wish to pull? Okay,
Nope.
perfect.
And staff has no recommended changes in the agenda.
Awesome, thank you.
Move approval of the agenda.
I'll second.
Not an action item, but
It's not an action, so we can just move on.
Perfect.
Never mind.
We will go on to public comment. Anybody in the public wish to comment on anything not on our agenda today?
We do have 2 people.
Okay,
And Michael Garabedian, you are free to speak.
Good morning. Thank you. Mike Garabedian from Lincoln, where I live, and Placer County tomorrow. I have a comment about the need for planning, transportation planning overall, far more than what you're continually working on in the Measure M, the old Measure M projects plus baseline widening and so forth. It is basically a very not responsible activity by the county and by this body to not look at the overall picture and where it's going. It seems quite obvious that the highways planned for the future are not going to address the population that is already being approved in the housing that's just rampantly being approved right and left. So you ought to do that. All the studies you're doing, the things you're looking at are old chestnuts, pieces of things that might solve immediate problems to serve development that need something to get to 99, like baseline and stuff like that. You really have to grasp that question and not mislead. Make sure you're not misleading the people who are buying houses right now about the transportation nightmare that they are going to be faced with. Everybody here is going to be faced with, because what you're going to want to do to widen 65, to make the new interchange of 80, 65, to go out to baseline in a couple ways with Placer Parkway, and also these are not going to relieve the congestion that's coming. And all the data, all the studies show that the adding lanes, adding capacity does not relieve congestion. So here is another meeting where you're sitting there working on an old agenda that is outdated and unhelpful to the future people, who will include you living here and tied up in those, you and your families, tied up in that transportation nightmare. I really say good luck to you, and you need to change course and look at the overall picture. And thank you for this opportunity to address you.
thank you, Michael.
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
I'm on muting. Hello, my name is Peter Eklund. I'm a Rockland resident of 10 years. I'd like to speak briefly on an agenda item from the last meeting. Unfortunately, I didn't listen to that meeting. It involved a revised criteria for the unmet transit needs process. I respect the decision of the board to approve it, and I've had discussions with staff, and I understand their position, and we agree to disagree. But I'd like to just provide some comments, just to, I think give you more of a context of what I think the issues are. The 2 items that I want to talk about are the maximum walking distance to a bus stop, which the criteria says is 0.75, 3/4 of a mile, and the equivalency of a dial ride to fixed route service when looking at whether or not an area has transit service. On the distance to walking to a bus stop, the standard reference for walking distance is pretty well established. There's a graph that shows, really detailed data from a wide variety of transit systems. And basically what it shows for a regular bus transit system, 80% of the people walk a quarter mile or less. And when you get to a half mile, it virtually falls to 0. Now, that isn't to say that, that nobody walks further than that, but to have a standard that really doesn't have any good reference and basically is, I think the impact is to really not seriously look at how to provide adequate bus stops and transit service, I think is misleading. And it has, the unintentional consequences are that if somebody comes up with something in the unmet needs assessment as a service request and there's no transit service, then they'll apply that standard. If there is transit service and somebody still has to walk 0.7 miles or a long distance, it doesn't even count because it's an operational issue. And I've looked at all the bus stop spacing for Route 20. There's numerous examples where there's a need for intermediate bus stops between the existing ones. One of them is 0.82 miles in an area with some recent multifamily dwellings. But there's no, but the operator can probably say, well, they don't have to walk any further than 0.75 miles. Excuse me. By adding a bus stop intermediate, it would reduce their walking distance probably in half. So there's an unintended consequence there. The other one having to do with
Peter, that's your 3 minutes.
Excuse me?
I said that was your 3 minutes.
That's 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. One final comment. What the equivalency thing does basically is make all any service request into not an unmet need, just a priority, and it basically overrules anything that's said in short-range transit plans where needs are established there, and I just feel that that's going to collide. Those two things are going to collide later this year. There's some planning studies going on, and their unmet needs is going to come up, and they're going to come up with different results.
Thank you,
And
Peter.
I think that's unfortunate. Sorry.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent calendar for PCTPA. We have a motion. We have a motion. Second? Did you have something?
I'm sorry, is this consent?
Yeah.
Red light.
Oh, sorry.
Exactly.
Anybody wish to comment on the consent calendar, both public or commission?
Or wish to remove an item.
Or wish to remove an item from this? It's only one item. This is it.
Nope.
All right, a motion? And a second?
All right.
So good to be back in person.
This side's chatty today. This side's quiet today. What's going on here?
Oh, boy.
We're just too much coffee.
Here we are. Okay, I got a motion and a second. Baker.
Aye.
Broadway. Yes. Burris.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes. Howdeshelt. Joyner.
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I-80 Auxiliary Lanes Project Construction Cooperative Agreement, Dave.
Good morning, members of the board. David Melko. I will be handling this item. Okay, so the item, there's a staff report, and we've got a brief PowerPoint presentation to walk you through the staff report. You have a copy of the construction co-op before you. I apologize for the delayed delivery, but literally it's sort of hot off the press. We got it yesterday. So we have gone through with Caltrans attorneys, and our legal counsel and staffs have reviewed it, and so it's ready for board consideration for approval. And as part of the presentation here, I'll walk through why it's necessary or it's important to have the board act today. So What is a construction co-op? So just to real briefly, because it's a lengthy document with a lot of legalese, it basically defines the roles and responsibilities between Caltrans and PCTPA with regarding implementation of the project, in this regard construction, as well as funding responsibilities. And that's basically the essence of it. And so it holds each party, to their respective roles and responsibilities. And in terms of funding, it defines that if there's a need for additional funding for the project, because the costs may increase due to inflation, we're in an inflationary environment, both parties will meet and confer and discuss. And of course, at that point in time, if there's a need for additional funding, which we hope not, we would come back to the board. So the construction cooperative agreement is required for the California Transportation Commission to allocate Senate Bill 1 monies as well as COVID relief STIP project funding. There is a substantial amount of SB 1 money allocated to this project. If you recall, back in December 2020, seems like a long time ago, but we received large grant awards through two Senate Bill 1 programs. The deadline for us to submit these allocation requests, and they'll be jointly submitted, although Caltrans is the lead agency, is May 2nd, and the CTC is tentatively scheduled to consider and approve those allocations in June, their June meeting. So what we're asking you today basically is to approve entering into the cooperative agreement subject to SPARTA, including the project in the Tier 1 fee program with a construction funding commitment not to exceed $10 million. So your approval today is conditioned based upon the next meeting where SPARTA will consider allocation requests for several projects, including the I-80 Aux Lanes project. And we're also asking you to authorize the chair and the executive director to execute the agreement. And the execution process will occur electronically, and we'll work all that out with the people that need to sign it. And we're also asking you to authorize the executive director to execute any future amendments to the funding summary or to shift funding contributions, so long as it does not increase the overall PCTPA funding contribution. If we get into that situation where we need more funding, we come back to the board. This allows Mike basically to move, for example, regional surface transportation monies, maybe from the westbound segment to the eastbound segment. So just to align in terms of if you have split funding, sometimes it's harder to manage, and so it makes the overall management of the funding contributions easier. So total cost of this project. So this project started in 2014 with what was called the PA and ED phase. So for everyday people, that's the planning and environmental phase, and so through construction is $42.5 million. I know that sounds like a lot of money, but you've got about a 4.5 mile project here, so that's about $10 million a mile, which is pretty standard for freeway lane construction. So as part of the construction cooperative agreement, we will be providing funding for construction of the project. We've secured approximately $33 million. Leaving a gap of, let's just round it and just say $10 million, because that's what our SPARTA request is. And we're recommending that the funding gap be addressed by SPARTA. Now, what will SPARTA funding be covering? It'll be covering mitigation, construction support, and supplemental contingency. And the supplemental contingency is important because we're in an inflationary environment, and the bids for this project won't occur until much later this fall. And so we want to make sure that we have a reserve. So with that, so here's the table, and it shows in terms of the construction cooperative agreement, the total construction cost of this project is about $37.5 million. Now, for those of you who do quick math, I mean, you say you have $32.6 million, and now you need to construct the project 37.5, so that's about a $5 million gap, correct? But as I pointed out, bidding won't occur until later in the fall. And so we, as I, in the previous slide, noted supplemental contingency. So the additional $5 million, getting to a $10 million SPARTA request, is to include that supplemental contingency. That supplemental contingency is not part of this agreement. It's within the control of PCTPA. So the allocation of that will occur with Mike, and then, of course, if we need to do so, come back to the board. So it's within our control. In terms of, the two primary components of the cooperative agreement, there's construction support. Of that 5.3 million, 745,000 is for PCTPA, staff and consulting. The rest of it goes to Caltrans. And in terms of construction, we have arranged for the funding, and so Caltrans is the implementing agency. And so the funding picture here is a hybrid. It's federal, state, and local. So it's, I think we have 9 funding sources on this project, which actually is a lot for a project of this size. So in terms of schedule, assuming, knock on wood, that you approve the construction cooperative agreement, or conditionally approve it today, and that subsequently Sparta approves the commitment to include it in the Tier 1 fee program with a commitment of up to $10 million. The next phase is called Ready to List. That's an internal Caltrans process, which basically says the project is ready to bid and to go out for construction. The Ready to List phase is an important phase because that is something that the CTC looks at in terms of Caltrans recommends to the CTC that this allocation request is ready to go forward. So we would submit the allocation request in May, and then in parallel to that, because some of the funds here are federal and they're locally controlled federal funds. I mentioned the RSTP funding. There's also some COVID RSTP. We control those, so we will submit, the acronym is RFA, a request for authorization, and we will do that in parallel. So the CTC hopefully acts in June, and headquarters will advertise bids in September, and they open bids in November, and the contract gets approved in December, and notice to proceed starts in February, and the project construction schedule, which includes weather delay and rain days within it, and a minimum of 240 working days, should be completed by mid-March of 2024. Now, just want to point out, when the project is complete by March of 2024, there will probably still be some tail end cleanup. There's always, Jersey barriers, those types of things that are along the side of the road that the contractor will need to clean up. But the project will be complete by March. And so we are recommending that the board conditionally approve entering into a construction cooperative agreement with Caltrans, subject to a project funding commitment by Sparta, which is on their agenda today. And we have the concurrence from both the Sparta and the PCTPA Technical Advisory Committee. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Curiosity. COVID RSTP. I've never heard of it before.
Well, neither did a lot of people until the pandemic occurred. So it's just another federal fund source that came through, and it was an enhancement to the Regional Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, and it came through the COVID bills that were done in 2020. And some of the monies went to the state, and some of the monies, as part of working with the state, were allocated directly to regions, and so we're one of the regions that has a share of that money.
All right. We'll talk about that offline. It sounds like they just slid it into a larger bill. There's nothing COVID related in this.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's all part of just getting people back to work and jobs and stimulating the economy and just providing, infrastructure projects are seen as a means to stimulate the economy and provide jobs. So.
Okay. Question, David. Thanks for the package. Very good information. So you mentioned we're in a environment of rapidly changing costs and inflation. If we were to get an unpleasant surprise at the bid opening in November and find out that additional funding was needed for the project, what do you think the most likely source would be? Would it be more funding from Sparta, or is there possibility for some of the other funding sources to participate at a higher level.
So assuming the Sparta board approves, including in the fee program, and you have a commitment by the board of up to 10 million, 5 million right now is needed to close the funding gap to get to construction. So you have $5 million in reserve. So, you know, if it's over 5 million, I mean, that's something that we will be talking about with Caltrans, what elements of the project can be shaved, you know, deferred. Yeah, it's, if we need additional funding, we'd have to, you know, Mike would, you know, talk to the board, we would come back. The fact that it's part of the Sparta fee program, and I think the modeling shows that the commitment for, in terms of traffic generated within the Sparta fee districts over the course of, you know, the next 20 years would generate enough traffic traveling on these segments where the Sparta funding commitment could be greater than 10 million. So, and Rick may want to speak to that. So,
good morning. To be covered a little more detailed in the Sparta board, but the traffic modeling shows that with the cost of the project, the Sparta commitment could be up to 30 million. So that would, you know, that high of an increase, we sort of question the project, I think. But so there is the ability for Sparta to contribute more if it's needed, and that's a decision by the Sparta board.
Anything else on this side? Ken?
Yes, thank you. David, could you go back, original slide where you referenced the executive director's authority, granting authority, keep going. There you go, authorizing the executive director to execute. Relative to that, you spoke to a shift in funds. This would allow Mike to move funds if we identified, again, eastbound, westbound, need to move those. What triggers, I'm always cautious when movement of funds occurs, that there's not a review until after the fact, that you recognize that additional funding is needed. So is there anything that, you know, what will trigger a review with the board relative to movement of funds? So Mike, for example, we find that eastbound, we've run into additional costs due to unidentified issues. You're going to have to add to that as opposed to shifting funds. What's going to trigger the review with us? Dan brought up a great point regarding not just the costs of the bid, but also just ongoing costs and what would trigger that. So relative to that, my fear is always you authorize it and then we find out after the fact the money was moved, we're short. We need to move forward with the project. We kind of moved that to keep it knowing that we were going to be short as opposed to that being brought to the board immediately. Does that make sense?
Well, as the recommended action is conditioned, if it goes above the estimate, we have to come back to the board regardless. So this just allows during or slightly before construction, if we need to shift those funds within the allocated amount, we can do that. Authorizes us to do that. I will certainly bring to you probably in the executive director's report that, hey, we had to move this money from this to this. But if we need additional money, we do have to come back to you for that. You know, the danger here is during construction that something happens that we may have to come back to you very quickly for additional funding. But the plan right now is to, again, and David gave one example, shifting money from one section to the other section. It could be, you know, something to do with an environmental portion of the project. It could have something to do with, you know, mobilization or demobilization is more expensive on one side or in one place than another. There's a number of different things it could be. But as long as we stay within that funding cap, we don't plan to come back to you, so.
Okay, so it will trigger a review anytime it's identified that there will be an increase in the cost. That will immediately
The total
trigger a
cost,
review.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right.
great. And just wanted clarification of that. Too many times I've seen
funding allocated, and of course you have your contingencies built in, but then it goes beyond that and monies have been moved, then it's brought to the body to say, oh, by the way, if we want this to move forward, you have to do this, and it's well after the fact. I just want to avoid that.
Right. I would point out that we did have a lower contingency in prior, when we brought this to you before. Because of the current construction environment, we did actually increase the contingency to 10%. Because of what's going on, and it's something that all of our member agencies and others around the state are facing right now. It's a risk to put projects out to bid in this environment, and we're trying to mitigate it as best as possible.
Great, thank you. Rick, did you have something as well?
I was just going to add very briefly, the eastbound and westbound direction are technically separate grants and grant funds. So when we get the final construction actual bids, they have to be broken down between eastbound and westbound. And so there's a high likelihood that we will need to shift the non-grant funds a little bit in between those to make everything balance. So there is a need basically for Mike to have authority to be able to make those shifts without having to come back. But again, if the costs are above, then we would come back to the board to seek approval for additional costs.
Great, that's helpful, Rick, thank you. That's all I have.
Anything else on board?
I have none.
Any public comment? No. Okay, bringing it back.
Mr. Chairman, I'd
Wait.
like to make a motion if you're ready. Oh, I'm sorry.
Raise their hand at the last minute.
No.
Michael Garabedian, you are free to speak.
Thank you. Mike Garabedian, Placer County tomorrow, and live in Lincoln. I have some questions. We didn't see a map of this. That would be helpful to know exactly what we're talking about. I'm having trouble printing out my agenda. And I wonder how it is that this is a priority for Placer County. And then the other question, does this include the reducing of the eastbound I-80 to Douglas, 2 off lane, 2 lanes off, 1? Those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there is no map, but the project generally is from going northbound or eastbound. State Route 65 to Rockland Road, we're adding an auxiliary lane. For those of you who come off that interchange, you got to make that quick merge into that main line, and then if you want to get back to go to Sierra College or just get off Rockland Road to go into Rockland, you got to then make that merge back again. So the auxiliary lane is being pushed, is part of this project for that segment. And it's about slightly less than 2 miles in length. Then southbound, just generally again, State Route 65 to the Placer-Sacramento county line. So we have 4 main lines in there. When you get to Sacramento County, you're at 5 main lines. So the project is incorporating a westbound 5th lane to go match up with the 5th lane in Sacramento County. Mr. Garabedian is correct. The project does propose, as part of the Douglas off-ramp, to go from 2 lanes coming off the freeway to 1. It'll be a 1-lane exit. The ramp will still have 2 lanes at the top of the ramp, but in coming off, it'll be 1 lane there, and that's in order to be able to find enough right-of-way to be able to push the 5th lane all the way through to Sacramento County. The modeling under 2040 conditions shows that going from 2 lanes to 1 lane will not disrupt levels of service. And so it meets Caltrans warrants for a 1-lane off-ramp. And so that's why we go from 2 to 1. I think that covers his points at this point.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
No.
Thank you.
Are you ready for that motion, Mr. Chairman?
I'm ready.
I'll move that we conditionally approve the cooperative agreement with Caltrans for the construction phase of the I-80 auxiliary lanes project, subject to action by Sparta, with a construction funding commitment not to exceed $10 million.
Second.
We have a motion and second.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Haudashelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones. Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. All right, moving on, preliminary draft, fiscal year 22-23 overall work program and budget. Mike?
Morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. This is the time of year when we bring to you what we call a draft or preliminary overall work plan and budget for the coming fiscal year. And the process that we have is essentially we bring you this preliminary budget. We then come back to you in a couple months with the final budget, any changes that you request today, or any conditions that change over those 2 months. We also take in comments during that period of time from Caltrans, who has somewhat of regulatory control over our OWP because of components in there. And so today, my hope is to present to you a summary of that overall work plan, which sets our priorities for the coming year. I did want to mention that next month, just to avoid a little confusion, we will be bringing to you an amendment, our last amendment for the current fiscal year. So you're going to see budgets back and forth. So now you're going to see next year's budget this month. You'll see next year's budget in a final form a couple months from now. But next month, you're going to see the current fiscal year, and we go through a process to amend that twice, once in September and once in April. So hopefully that doesn't create too much confusion. That's typically our process, but we're going to be kind of going back and forth during these course of the next few meetings with budgets, and we'll try to do our best to alleviate that confusion if there is any. So some highlights from the 22-23 budget. We're presenting to you, as always, a balanced budget of about $6.8 million. Our budget fluctuates with workflow and with grants and with other funding sources that we have. So this time you're seeing about a 12.6% increase in the position or in our budget with our current work program. Our positions remain the same at 7 FTEs. We are going through a process, or we did go through a process to replace a number of our positions last year, but our total overall number of full-time equivalent positions has not changed. We again have a focus on congestion relief projects. I'm going to talk a little bit about CAPDI in a minute, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure that the state is implementing that will affect what we do. We focus on getting projects, as David explained in the prior item, ready to list. Our role is to complete the design of those projects when it comes to regional projects, and then get them ready for another agency to actually execute the construction. We don't have the staff to do construction inspection or what some of our member agencies or Caltrans does, but we get our projects ready to go. And then we assure that they come in on time and on budget. And my usual knock on wood, our history has been that every one of the projects that we've implemented has come in on budget, under budget, on time, or ahead of time. So we also focus on, as is our one of our primary purposes, on getting more money for future priorities of the agency and the board. And so we continue that aggressive pursuit, seeking funding for all of our projects as best as we can given the current environment. This year we're going to see, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, a very robust program with our transit. We have the need to really take another look at our transit programs due to reduced ridership before the pandemic, and also because of the pandemic itself challenging transit. We own, through Sparta, we own Nevada Station, the building that we're in. And so one of our work elements focuses on stabilizing our tenants and our expenses, and providing a good home for PCTPA. And so that's one of our key elements of our work plan. Lastly, I'd like to mention in our highlights that we maintain a contingency of about $1 million. That's 15.6% contingency, which is above the GFOA recommendation of 15%. So we are maintaining that level. That contingency helps us with cash flow, but also is there in times need for emergency if that ever arises. So a lot of what we do is congestion relief. So it's affected by traffic volumes, and we talk a lot about this and bring traffic reports to you. But the measure of traffic is very important to what we do, and we have to time our improvements by how we're doing in terms of traffic on our regional roadways and our member agency roadways. And so, as we've talked about many times, traffic is back and is back with a vengeance, and we're probably going to see, hopefully, the Deltacron or whatever is the latest variant is not going to affect us, but we're kind of looking at a return to work scenario this summer, hopefully, even maybe in a hybrid, probably more in a hybrid format. But that is going to cause traffic to increase and put pressure on us to get these projects funded and out the door. So, as always, we have our 5 major projects: the widening of State Route 65, the 65-80 interchange, the auxiliary lanes, which David just went over, Baseline Road, and Placer Parkway. These projects are all needed and are all mandated by our traffic model. And our traffic model focuses on multiple modes. So our objective has always been to focus on all modes as opposed to transit priorities or road priorities or bike ped priorities. We have to do it all to meet that traffic demand or that travel demand model, both here in Placer County and regionally. One of our key projects, the biggest project in our work program, is the 8065 interchange. We have worked very hard to get this project through PAED, or that preliminary engineering and environmental. We've obtained all of the permits necessary to improve this interchange. We designed and built phase 1 of this interchange, but we have a very large amount of work to go with phase 2 and phase 3 of this, which includes the flyover bridge section itself, but is very key to our meeting our traffic congestion requirements. As I mentioned, that we are now faced with having to be compliant with the Climate Action Plan for Transportation, and so we're going to be working within Work Element 41 on modifying this project. And one of the ideas that's coming forth, we're going to be looking at a lot of things, but one of the big ideas coming forth on this is to locate a regional light and medium duty truck charging facility as well as passenger vehicles around this interchange to bring it into CAPTI compliance to maximize our potential to get funding for this project. So Rick here to my left is going to be the project manager to manage a modification, if you will, with this program. And so you see us dedicating time and dollars to modify that or add to that project to make it compliant with CAPTI. The same goes with Highway 65. This illustration shows the first phase of the project, which is actually shovel ready and ready to go through design and environmental, and actually in this case final design. But we have to go back with this project because the likelihood of us getting funding at either the state or federal level, given its current configuration, is challenged. And so we're going to be going back and not only looking at this regional charging facility, and I would say that we're going to be working with our partners in Yuba County, the new Yuba County I'm going to get their name wrong, Transportation Agency, I'll use that as to simplify, to create a corridor plan for all of Highway 65 going up into Yuba County as well as Placer County, and working on an approach not only to have things like regional charging, but also to look at Things like moving the HOV lanes, which were a later phase of the project, moving those HOV lanes, which also could be transit priority lanes, up into phase one. And so again, we're going to have to look at reconfiguring this project in work element 42 to make sure that it's CAPTI compliant and we are able to get funding at either the state or federal level. David went through this project, and I'm sorry we didn't have this in our presentation earlier, but this is a map of the 80 auxiliary lane project, and David went through this very eloquently, and so I won't dwell on this. I just would mention that it is a very complicated project, so this is just one portion of this that demonstrates, putting what may seem to be a simple widening project into an area that's already very developed is very complicated and unfortunately very expensive. So, our next project that I'll mention is in our high priorities is work element 44, the Highway 49 gap closure project, a project that's been managed by Aaron Hoyt on our staff. And our hope is to move this into final design and get this project ready to list. This is a $14.4 million grant from the ATP program of the state to get this project implemented, which is part of an overall strategy along the Highway 49 corridor to make it more safe, both in Placer and Nevada counties. But we've had a number of pedestrian incidents over the years along Highway 49, and this project would create a continuous path on either one side of the street or the other of Highway 49 to allow pedestrians to have a place to walk and also bike lanes as well, instead of using the roadway, which again can cause accidents and make the highway unsafe. Work element 46 is our what we term our Placer-Sacramento Action Plan, which follows up on the Placer-Sacramento Gateway Plan that was done a number of years ago, which prioritized 150 projects along the corridor. And so Mike Costa and Rick Carter are going to be working on getting our projects, and David Melko as well, on working on getting our projects ready for funding. And so we've narrowed those projects down to 3 priorities, 2 involving the third track and 1 involving the Sacramento Intermodal Station, to get those projects ready for a large grant application this fall under the SB1 grant programs. And then this is the marquee project in that group for that solutions program, working mainly on the first phase of that, which would get us 3 additional daily round trips to Roseville, and then with phase 2 would get us 10 daily round trips. We've been working very hard on this, and thanks especially to Director Howdeshelt and Director Holmes, and Director Cavillo, they've been working very hard with PCTPA to work on a number of different funding sources for this, including the state's ITIP program and the federal CRISI program. And then the last component of this would be the Solutions for Congested Corridor program that I just talked about. So all of those funding sources are needed, along with approximately $100 million that we've received already to bring this first phase project, which is about $200 million, to fruition to allow those additional daily round trips to Roseville. Our hope long-term is to be able to expand that service to Rockland and to Auburn. However, with this project, we have to work with Union Pacific Railroad, and although they're open to those discussions, this first part of the project would conclude at Roseville at this point, because they own the railroad and they dictate the ability to expand that railroad. And then long term, we are also working on starting this year a feasibility study to look at expansion of rail service all the way up to Reno. And the State Division of Rail and Mass Transit have decided to put this in their plan, and so that's a very long-term objective, probably 20 plus years that it'll take to bring that to fruition, if it is feasible. But we have to start somewhere, and we're starting that process this year. Work element 40 is Placer Parkway. We have a number of projects going on in this endeavor. One is we are updating the traffic model and fee update, which justifies the existence or the addition of Placer Parkway. It has before, and it continues to do that. So we'll be working with our member agencies and the development community to update the Tier 1 and Tier 2 fee programs. We have another related issue with the Tier 2 fee program. We set up a deferral program during the Great Recession and during COVID-19 to help mitigate economic impact. The time has come to where we need to move to phasing that deferral program out because it challenges our ability to actually finance projects. And so you're going to be seeing things come before PCTPA and Sparta related to phasing out that deferral program. And then lastly, a couple things were, probably the biggest project here is the construction of the first phase of that project. And we're working with Placer County, our member agency, to finalize design and right-of-way for phase 1, which would be to complete the Whitney Ranch interchange and take Placer Parkway in its first segment all the way to Foothills Boulevard, where it would connect to the city of Roseville in that first phase. And then Placer Parkway then is built over time with the next developments. So we would be working with Placer Ranch next, and then with Amoroso Ranch and so on and so forth. This project's designed to be funded and phased probably over the next 40 to 50 years, but it's certainly needed to meet our traffic impacts of the region. Lastly, we'll be working on a minor alignment change for a section of the future phase of that. And there's when the project was originally built, a portion of this crossed over Dry Creek in western Placer County. And it created a habitat island, if you will, which is not the most ideal situation in terms of managing habitat. It's usually better to manage larger parcels than small, narrow strips. And so we're going to be working on a minor amendment to that plan, which would create a better contiguous strip of habitat. So we're working with the city of Roseville and Placer County and property owners in the area to do that habitat, that minor alignment change over the next couple years. Work element 47 is the Baseline Riego Road project thing we brought to you many times. We're working on a fee program. David Melko is our project manager that is heading a multi-agency effort of Placer County, the city of Roseville, and PCTPA to come up with a means by which to finance the 4-lane expansion of that project. And then lastly, one of the last few projects here is our funding strategy. This remains a vital part of our funding program, or our overall work plan, because we have a structural deficit in transportation funding, whether it's for roads, whether it's for bike ped, or whether it's for transit. In the old days, we used to be able to get 90% of the money from the state or federal government. We'd have to come up with 10, usually using impact fees. Because of competition and other prioritization of the state and federal government, it's now a 50-50 formula. To be competitive, not to meet the rules, but in order to actually get the money, you have to come up with a much larger amount of those funds, and that's created that gap. And as we've stated many times before, in South Placer in particular, we have a $3 billion need for transportation. The private sector pays for about $2 billion of it, and we have to come up with $1 to $1.2 billion. And so we've been working very hard to look at a scenario of a South Placer sales tax measure, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the next agenda item. A lot about this in the next agenda item, but this shows that We, back in 17, when we started looking at this again, we were up in the 75% support. Right now, because of a number of factors, including the pandemic, we sit at about 63%. This budget or overall work plan that you have before you gives our ability to pivot to either a 2022 approach, which may be unlikely at this point, or a 2024 approach. So this work plan gives that flexibility to move in either direction. If we go for 2022, we would be looking at things like getting ready for bonding for a successful measure. If we look at 2024, that's a continuation of our outreach program. As mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we have a very robust program in terms of looking at our transit programs. Transit before the pandemic, as with most suburban communities around the United States, was seeing a very steep decline in local service ridership. Our commuter buses were doing very well, but our local service was very challenged. And so we had to address a change in transit before the pandemic, after or during, and hopefully after the pandemic. It exacerbates that situation, and so we've been working very closely with our transit agencies to determine how to address this. And what we're going to be doing is starting this year our short range, or what we're proposing to do is to start our short range transit plan process early. And also look at a new type of relook at our transit systems. I would say a total potential revamping of our transit systems in some cases, called a comprehensive operational analysis. So my cost is going to be managing this program for us, working with our member transit agencies to start that short-range transit process, to look at comprehensively at our systems and see where we need to go to essentially get bodies and seats in our transit systems as opposed to empty buses that we currently have. There is a lot going on with SACOG regionally with transit. We certainly will participate in those programs, and hopefully they will lead to a benefit to connect our transit systems to other transit systems. We do, however, need to, in this case, focus on ourselves, probably to a greater extent, but certainly it would benefit us to have better connections to other systems such as Sacramento Regional Transit. So we'll be working with SACOG very closely on that. Before the pandemic, we adopted a new program called Placer Rides. So we converted Healthcare Express, if you recall, to which is a program to provide rides to people to their medical appointments. That Healthcare Express is where we took larger cutaway buses, and that allowed transporting people to their medical appointments. It was a very challenged program in terms of ridership and thus very high cost, and we converted that into a 100% volunteer reimbursement system, and we'll be coming out of the pandemic. We'll be looking at marketing that program and increasing the availability and presence of that program. Likewise, we're working with Sierra College on a transit pass program. We've been working with them for a number of years on this, again, also challenged by the pandemic, but we are working in earnest with Sierra College and our transit agencies to hopefully create a program we call kind of a pilot to the pilot. So given the current level of students at Sierra College, we're looking at hopefully starting a small program and testing the waters, if you will, to see if this transit program will be viable for Sierra College. Sierra College students are the largest group of transit riders in the county, and so hopefully this will come to fruition. We're working with the city of Roseville on the South Placer Express service that was also funded under the same SB1 programs that funded the 80 auxiliary lane projects. That is a unique new service to Placer County where we have high frequency bus service that goes from Lincoln to the hospital complexes in Roseville and then on to the Watt Avenue Light Rail Station using electric buses. And we'll be working very closely with the city of Roseville and other partners to bring that online in the next 2 years. We also are working with our systems on, they have a mandate to electrify their entire systems by 2040, so we're working closely with all our 3 transit agencies to do that as well. And then lastly, microtransit is, as I brought up in the last several meetings, we have a RFP process that is still in process or is still in play. Mike Costa is leading that for our agency, working with our transit agencies to acquire a technology that would enable our transit services to implement a microtransit system on a pilot basis in South Placer County. It has already been implemented in Auburn and in North Lake Tahoe very successfully, as well as other agencies around the Sacramento region, and our hope is to bring that to South Placer in the coming years. With that, I'll conclude my presentation. Apologies for its length, but would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions from board members?
I do have a question. I apologize. I'm new to this, but it was just with regards to the Highway 49 gap closure project. On your slide, you showed, it looks like some gray and green. And could you just differentiate between, is the green what you're proposing to do with the project and gray is existing, or what is that?
I will actually let Aaron Hoyt, our project manager, answer that question. I'll go back to that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you're correct. The area in green on the screen is portions of sidewalk we're planning to construct with this project. So we're currently almost about the 90% design phase. This is approximately 3 miles of sidewalk that will be constructed. Caltrans last fall, early this spring, wrapped up about another mile of sidewalk. So the corridor, before Caltrans constructed that last mile, was about 25% coverage in sidewalk. So really, most of the corridor did not have sidewalk. So after Caltrans's project and this project, it'll actually go up to 75% coverage.
75% coverage. And so is the gray existing?
The gray is either existing or what Caltrans had constructed.
Okay,
We
so
lumped
it's
those
already-
together, and the purpose of this map here was just trying to identify specifically, once the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure is complete, where will sidewalks be?
Great. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the clarification on that. So that's good news.
Any other questions?
I just had a comment. I really appreciate the focus on transit here. I had an opportunity Sunday night to go to St. John's Episcopal in Roseville, where they are part of the nomadic program with the Gathering Inn. And a gentleman had shared with Father Cliff that he got a job, but it was at the Nevada station, and he wasn't sure how he was going to get there. So I shared with Father Cliff all the options for someone without a vehicle to get to a job. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I would point out, and I know Peter Eklund is going to be commenting on this, but I wanted to say, or I forgot to say that, the unmet transit needs process is a process that was set up many years ago with the state of California to look at our transit systems every year and see where those unmet transit needs are. It's not a very good way to plan future transit. And so, but what we have in our work plan, this short-range transit planning process, which we typically do every 7 years, and we're speeding it up a little bit because of what's gone on. And then the comprehensive operational analysis, that is the ideal place to plan for fixing parts of our transit system that do not work very well. And so our hope is to engage many of our transit stakeholders, including Mr. Eklund, in that process, which we think will be a much better place for making those changes and to receiving public comment than the annual unmet transit needs.
Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this? Perfect. Peter
Eklund, you're free to
Hi.
speak.
Yeah, this is Mr. Eklund again. I want to strongly support the entire work program, and not just transit, but also the roads. I think they all need to be done, and I favor the sales tax. Let's get on that as soon as possible. I want to comment particularly on the transit elements, though. This is the first time in 17 years that any new services are being put on the road. And I think this is a major accomplishment that, we should recognize Mike and his staff for doing that. But it presents some issues too. You can't just insert any new services in an existing network and not have any unintended consequences. So as this things go forward, the staff needs to be nimble and flexible in making minor changes to make sure these projects are successful. And that's particularly important. I want to emphasize a couple of things. The short-range transit plan combined is a big step forward also, but it does require that cities and agencies agree on integration. It doesn't mean, the combined thing doesn't mean anything if they aren't agreeable to move ahead in integration. And this has been on the books as something to do since 2007 with a master plan, and nothing has happened. So that effort needs to go forward tomorrow. Start working on that. The other things that need to be done, engage the public. During the pandemic and even before that, I don't think the projects have not engaged the public. I would like to see a citizen advisory board for transit with all this stuff coming on board. I think you'd benefit from it. You get some feedback that you don't get now. All you get right now is what I call 3-minute audio tweets. Anyway, so engage the public, integration, try to get some lessons learned. For 17 years, you had the same routes. There's problems top to bottom. Try to find out the lessons learned so you're going ahead and you can learn from that. A consultant's going to come on board that is starting from scratch. Try to give them the lessons learned, and then finally start regaining your ridership. You can't bring on new things if you haven't even begun to look at how you're going to regain your ridership, and that's public awareness, it's marketing, not just the new things, but overall. Even if there's problems, it needs to be marketed, and it needs to be public awareness. Just a quick story. I called the PCT. I was trying to figure out NextBus, how it works. And I called them up, and they said, "Oh, it doesn't work anymore." They couldn't go from 3 to 5, in terms of the internet, and so it doesn't work anymore. And I said, "Well, when did it stop working?" No, actually, the other reason I called is this. I'd like to get to NextBus, and I followed the instructions on the website. It turns out that those instructions have been wrong. They were never correct. The 2 years it's been on there, nobody could actually learn how to use NextBus by looking at the website. So, and I called up the lady, she says, it's nice to hear get your call. People aren't aware of what we do. So public awareness, marketing, and start working on integration and lessons learned, and engage the public. Those are the key, and you have to do top to bottom.
Thank you, Peter.
I think I got as much as I could in 3 minutes.
Little over, but we're good. Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
Michael Garabedian, you're free to speak.
Thank you. Mike Garabedian, Placer County, tomorrow with a couple of kind of observation/questions. On the truck charging station, the first time I've heard of that, an important issue there is probably exactly where it would be located. And I bring that up because one of the results of Placer Parkway and the Rego baseline widening could very well be attracting cross-country truck traffic onto those highways. So where you locate a charging station might affect whether truck traffic would use 65 or not. And a thought about transit. something that should at least be discussed is Roseville going back into Sacramento Regional Transit like it used to be. I'm not saying we can go back to the 1990 plan to have light rail go to Galleria, but I think that should be something discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Perfect, thank you. Any direction from board members?
I just wanted to say that I was pleased to see the discussion on the microtransit for South Placer County. As staff mentioned, we have a great program on demand here in Auburn, and it's really worked well. And so I encourage you to continue with that, and it's really happy to see that. So works, it's great. Our residents love it, and our visitors as well, so.
Awesome. Thank you.
And, Mr. Chairman, I have a stack to Mr. Eklund's comments. I have a stack. So on March 29th at Monk's Cellar, we'll be sharing transportation and transit stories, right? And
Yes.
there's more, aren't there?
Yes,
There's
there
one on the
are more
31st.
meetings. Yeah, I'll mention those in the next,
Okay.
the next item.
I got a stack too.
Well, where's yours?
In Lincoln.
Oh, I'll go to
Alder's
you.
Brew House.
I'll go to yours, you go to mine.
All right.
All right.
Everybody got a stack?
No stack over here. We're stackless.
Perfect. Moving on, we'll move on to verbal update, or you got something?
Just a question on the OWP that was triggered by one of the comments by Mr. Garabedian. My understanding as it relates to the charging station implementation is that really what that's doing is PCTPA staff making a quick pivot on a couple of projects that are already underway to do some basically analysis on how truck charging could be incorporated into some existing projects that you're working on, and figuring out what the best location would be and how to incorporate that is part of what the work program is.
Correct. We are also working closely with SACOG and some other partners to have it integrated into a regional network of charging facilities. Interstate 80 is actually designated by the Federal Highways Administration as a zero-emission highway, and so it gives us an opportunity to, as Mr. Garabedian said, to capitalize upon interstate travel. And so, we have not determined a location at all, but we are kind of starting that process to see, well, is it feasible and where would be the best place to put it? So.
Yeah, and reading between the lines, you don't have to read that closely between the lines, that should make us eligible for sources of funding that we might not otherwise be eligible for.
Hopefully, yes.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll move on to.
We need to take action, Mr.
Do we need to take
Chairman.
action on that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll move approval of the preliminary draft for 2022-23 overall work program and budget.
I'll second.
Motion second.
Baker.
Aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Aye.
Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Alrighty. Verbal update and direction on transportation funding strategy. Mike, back to you.
Thank you. Because of the importance of the funding strategy to our plan, and because of it's vital to obtain local matching funding for these programs, matched with the program schedule, if you will, which is going to be coming to you in the next coming months. I thought it was prudent to give you a small update on kind of where we're at with things. Also joining me here today is Cherry Spriggs with FSB Core Strategies, who is available to answer any questions. I would say that Cherry is challenged this morning with a nasty cough, so I'm not going to make her speak to any great extent, but she is available here to answer any questions. So, as I stated in the OWP presentation, the problem is created by a change in the formula. and the need in South Placer for about $1 billion to $1.2 billion. And so we took the board's direction earlier in the year to implement our outreach program for the funding strategy. We achieved a 63% approximately approval rating using our data from FM3. That is affected tremendously by traffic because in our mind, if as people return to work, they're going to be facing the challenges of commuting and facing this day to day, and our at least anecdotal evidence is that until we get to that point to where people are facing a commute every day, we're probably not going to get to that 2/3. But we are implementing our program, and our program is essentially that we conduct outreach, we poll, we adjust our program, we adjust our message, depending on current circumstances, and then we poll again, and that's a proven methodology used in many other self-help counties in California, of which there's 25 more other counties who have already achieved what we're trying to achieve. And so that methodology is implemented to reach out to our proposed South Placer district. So we're doing that outreach in many different formats. Here's just a few examples on the screen of things that we've done, including earned media and other articles and other news items in local television stations. So we're implementing a very robust program with that. It also includes a monthly column that I've been doing in Gold Country Media to kind of explain the impact and benefits of dealing with traffic congestion. We are also implementing a robust program using social media. We've implemented our live traffic cams on State Route 65 and Interstate 80, working with our partners who own buildings along those corridors to get those traffic cameras built, and also to get them with our efforts of the FSB team to get those on actual television broadcasts. It's been a challenging process, although we designed it exactly for what they need. You actually have to then convince them to actually use it. And recently we were able to get ABC 10 to start utilizing that, and our hope is that we will begin to fully utilize that in the coming months. We've focused on another big focus of ours is the Galleria. It's the single largest place for gathering of people in the region. And so we have a kiosk there, and we rewrapped that kiosk again to focus on our messaging. We are implementing in 40 businesses in South Placer a thing called Rocket TV, which is it plays a shortened version of our video in those businesses, and again gives an opportunity for people to see and then go to see kind of what the issue is, and then to go to our website to find out more information. We did earlier in the year conduct a number of workshops, 15 of those, to reconfirm our expenditure plan. Many of our board members participated in those meetings. We are going to continue that outreach in person as we come out of the pandemic, and as was mentioned by Director Houdeschelt and Director Joyner, we have a number of in-person public meetings coming up. We'll provide that complete schedule. We're still tweaking and finalizing that, but in the coming days, we'll get you all a list of those events in our community, in our South Placer communities of Roseville, Rockland, and Lincoln. Those will occur in late this month and early part of April. Getting ready for our next polling, which is scheduled to begin on April 11th and conclude about a week after. We will then move into having the results presented to our subcommittee of our board, and then back to our board on April 27th. I'd like to give you I'd like to play our current video. We have, as in years past, focused on the impact of traffic congestion on emergency response. It's something that many of our residents are very concerned about. As you know, we did an analysis to look at, well, what is the impact on emergency response if we don't address traffic congestion in South Placer? And if you recall, that analysis showed that response time, if we don't address traffic congestion, will double and in some cases quadruple if we don't address that. And so this video takes a quick look at that. So we'll play this right now.
911, what's your emergency? Dispatch to Engine 5, what's your progress?
So one thing or one immediate question that people have when they see that video is, and this comes directly from our emergency responders, is, if a fire truck or a police car is coming down the freeway with its lights on, don't people get over anyway? Unfortunately, the answer is yes and no. Most people get over, but a good number of them don't. They still hear the sirens and see the lights, and they don't know what to do, and they don't pull over. And if everybody doesn't pull over, you can't get around that stuff. And it is a real impact on response time to our hospitals. And so we are addressing that situation with this video. As I mentioned, coming up, we're going to be doing a lot of this stuff leading up to that April 11th polling. I guess the only thing I didn't mention is in regards to social media and streaming media. That has been a very successful outreach component of what we've been doing over the last few years. We have designed that social media and streaming media to gear directly to the residents in those areas, and we are designing a program that'll hit about 1.6 million impressions before that April 11th deadline. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And again, this last slide is kind of where we're at that 63%. And again, Cherry Spriggs is also here if there's a question that I can't answer.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions of board?
Just one, can you get this to me electronically?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
A quick one. So polling April 11th, probably polling results coming back to the board in May, at the May meeting?
No, they'll be back to you on the April 27th meeting.
You'll be able to turn them around that quickly?
Yes.
Great.
Technology.
We can do it. And it'll first go to the subcommittee about a week prior to the board meeting, and then to the full board on the 27th. And that will be a key decision point. Then if we're if the stars align and we're above 66.67%, staff may recommend that you move forward with 2022. That's unlikely, but it is valuable to poll because it's not only to see where we're at, but we have to adjust our message. And so our team, including Cherry and Cherry Spriggs, Alda Panesci, and the rest of the team need that data to constantly tweak that message to really address things to the public. And as I mentioned earlier, our 22-23 work plan gives the ability to go in either direction, either a 2022 or a 2024 approach.
Yeah, how do I poll the people on I-80 and in the congestion and ask them if
Roll down your window.
roll down my window? Okay. Yeah, I just noticed in the last couple of weeks, boy, coming, either going to downtown Sacramento where I work or coming home. Yeah, I mean, and this is 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 5:30 in the evening. Traffic's back.
It is.
It is back. It's actually kind of interesting. I commute all over the western United States, so I see it quite a bit. But it seems like the Sacramento County to Roseville has a much more increased traffic than the westbound in the morning. You look at kind of the westbound commute, and it's just really bottlenecked through Roseville as I'm headed towards Sacramento. You know, at about 8 a.m. and you go, the commute has almost flopped. You know, in certain instances. So, thank you. Do we need to open this up for a public comment? Yeah. Public comment. Alrighty.
Michael Garabedian, you're free to speak.
Hi, Mike Garabedian, Placer County Tomorrow. Well, it's about time Placer County started planning ahead.
You still there?
I guess my my feed is coming feeding in and
We
out.
got you now.
Thank you. Yeah, the Placer County really needs to turn around its planning, its land use planning, which has significantly failed in many ways, and one of them is, and we should stop repeating things like the Sutter facility, medical facility, the campus is there, located right next to the 8065 interchange with no direct highway access, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, developers making a deal with whether it's CSUS or these other facilities without adequate advanced planning of any kind, and trying to patch it up later with adding highway capacity is kind of backwards, and we should learn from those lessons. Wish we would.
Thank you. Anyone else? Perfect, thank you. Any direction from any board members? Perfect. Move on to the executive director's report.
Could there be more?
What else
Just
you
a
got?
few little things. Just a few little things. So I'll be quick here. So wanted to mention that we have Cap to Cap coming up. Many of you are participating in that annual trip, which is back in person this year with the Sacramento Metro Chamber. We typically send the chair of our agency or our agency board to that, and so Director Baker is going to be joining myself in that trip in late May. I did want to point out, and because many of you are going, and you actually don't have to be going if you'd like to participate in this, is there is a Cap to Cap pre-meeting on Tuesday, April 5th at Sierra College. So on your dais is some information related to that. If you'd like to come, you're more than welcome. And if you are going to Cap and you would like to kind of talk about the transportation part of that before the meeting, please give me a call. Also in our budget is a plan to participate in the Placer Business Alliance trip, which is scheduled for November of this year, this fall. So that's in its early planning stages. The next thing I'd like to mention quickly is the whole RSTBG CMAQ issue. Rick Carter is our project manager for that project, and we are working very closely with our sister agencies, SACOG and EDCTC, on that, as you know, and that group is working with a larger group at CalCog, and also meeting with FHWA and Caltrans staff. It is moving forward, however, it's moving forward a little slower, surprise, than we thought it was going to be, and so some items that we were going to bring to you related to our funding round are delayed by a month or two. So Rick will be bringing forward some recommendations to you, albeit about 30 days after we had planned to. I did mention in my OWP our efforts with Sierra College. We have a very critical meeting next week with the president of the college, Willie Duncan, and staff, and Director Howdeschelt and Director Broadway are participating in that meeting, again, hopefully resulting in a pilot to the pilot. The last thing I would like to mention is that we have going to be having another change in our staff. I'm happy to report that happy, and it's a melancholy point at this point, but it's happy because Aaron Hoyt on our staff is going to be moving on to Nevada County Transportation Commission after 8.5 years of service with our agency. I'm very sad because he's leaving us, but I'm very happy because he's getting one heck of a promotion to deputy director of that agency. And it's always good to see your staff moving on to bigger and better things. So with that, I'm gonna let Aaron talk for a little bit about his tenure here and his movement on to Nevada County. And then I would welcome our directors to make any comments that they'd like to.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's been a real honor and a pleasure to have served you guys for the last 8.5 years. Some of you, I've had a great opportunity because of that time period in your service here to enjoy some good conversations we've had on projects and just about other things going on in our communities. And I think what I've enjoyed the most is your leadership as a board to the staff here. And we've accomplished a lot of things for the small, but mighty agency, and we've received a lot of recognition, under the leadership throughout the Sacramento region and as well as the state. So it's real a testament to what you've done, your commitment to looking at South Placer County as a whole and what we've been able to accomplish here. So while I'll no longer be working here and serving you, Dan, I'll probably be seeing you. And with interactions within Nevada County and others here, I still may see you around the community at different events and maybe even at council meetings. So I'll still be here as a resident of Placer County, and that's something I've enjoyed, being able to work in the community that I live in. So it's been a great pleasure, and I think you're still in great hands with the staff here, and look forward to seeing all the great things that this agency and you and your individual cities will accomplish. So thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. We will most definitely be missed, and we appreciate your professionalism and all your hard work on behalf of Placer County. So thank you. Anybody?
Yeah, Aaron, it's, boy, it just seems like you just started here, but I know it's been. But, yeah, yeah, me too. But anyhow, I've seen you grow in your role. You really move forward in a very professional way. And you understand the issues, and I'm really happy that you're going to a nearby county, Nevada County, which needs all the help it can get, but no offense. Anyhow, I really welcome the opportunity that you're going to have, so congratulations.
Sure, I'll just echo that, Aaron. It's been an extreme pleasure working with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Your knowledge, experience, wisdom have benefited this board greatly. You will be missed. I would hope that once you get up there, you do some good work, but you miss working with this agency as well. We've done some really heavy lifts in the last few years, and you've been a big part of that. So thank you, and good luck.
Mr. Chairman, no, Mr. Broadway.
Okay.
Broadway.
Well, thank you, Bruce.
My honorable friend on the other
Appreciate
side.
that. So Aaron, congratulations. Certainly well-deserved. Our loss, of course, is their gain, but I want to wish you the best. But I also want to thank you, not only for your efforts on the projects, but going above and beyond. Leadership Rockland has benefited from many a presentation from you and engaging with the community at large. And so, you've demonstrated a tremendous amount of leadership and quality in the work you do. It's reflective in the promotion that you're getting. And again, Nevada County is very fortunate to have you joining the team, but you are leaving us in a great place because you've helped move us forward, and we'll just have to try to find a way to fill those shoes. So again, congratulations and best.
Yeah, I was just going to say, all of these projects are lengthy and complex and not easy to distill down into PowerPoints. but your entire staff and everyone that I've had the honor and pleasure to work with over the last couple of years have made me feel like I can go out and explain it at least start the conversation in the community, and know that I can turn to you as a resource to fill in where they have specific questions. So thank you. I mean, this is, every time I come here, I feel guilty that I don't remember as much when I walk away, but I know I have the PowerPoints and I know I have everything. And it's, when you're explaining these complex and lengthy processes, that's not easy to do. So thank you.
Yes. Good luck.
At our next meeting, we will be bringing back to you, because of Aaron's long tenure, a resolution for Aaron thanking him formally. So that'll come at the April meeting, so.
Great, thank you.
And cake, I'm sure there'll be cake.
Cake? At
Well,
9
we have to
a.m.?
see if Aaron can come back to that meeting. He'll be already at Nevada County. If he comes back and joins us, we'll bring cake.
All right, thank you, Mike and Aaron. Board direction to staff. Anybody have anything? There's some informational items for you, and we will call this meeting adjourned.